My name is Justin, and I am the co-chair of the PTO partners here at St. Raphael School with Mark LaRue, and alongside Chris Gian, a lifelong educator at St. Joseph in Wakefield, and parents like Lauda and Gabriele, who you may get to meet, we kicked off this initiative to spark meaningful conversation. Much thanks to Father Paul for bringing us under one roof, and Paul and Margie Chisholm for their lifelong dedication to Catholic education, as evidenced by their work here, Catholic Memorial, and Malden Catholic, to name a few. It's been a big supporter of us encouraging this conversation, reaching out to other parishes. We have representation and leadership here from the Communion and Liberation Movement, St. Joseph Medford, St. Joseph Wakefield, St. Raphael's, St. Patrick's Stoneham, St. Agnes, St. Mary's Brookline, Sparhawk Academy, and St. Benedict's in Natick. We also have Lowell Catholic represented here as well. So praise God and much thanks to you all for coming together at a time when the world is trying to break us apart. I almost wanted to do like, who's from St. Mary's Agnes? Chicago. Yeah. So every question we ask today is rooted in one fundamental mission. How do we teach Christ's message in Catholic elementary and middle schools? At the inaugural Mass for Catholic Schools Week at St. Agnes, Bishop Henning said, "We teach Christ." And that was his favorite mission statement that his elementary school principal set forth in his youth. Since Archbishop Henning said it was his favorite mission statement, we decided why not make it ours too for the panel tonight. In 1979, JP2 had his own quote, encouraging Catholic schools to communicate Christ. Between Archbishop Henning and John Paul II, we can feel good about the track we're on. But even among like-minded Catholics deeply invested in education, creating this panel required discussion, conflict, listening, agreement, disagreement. Now imagine running a school with those same challenges. Catholic education faces adversity and attack, but in every instance our response is the same. The Holy Spirit can fill the need and overcome the hurdles. Check out this quote from Pope John Paul II that Lauda shared as we were coming together. "Brethren, we know the difficulties involved in preserving Catholic schools, the uncertainties of the future, and yet we rely on the help of God and your own zealous collaboration and untiring efforts so that Catholic schools can continue, despite grave obstacles, to fulfill their providential role at the service of genuine Catholic education." Anyone want to guess when that was written? That quote's from 1979, but it would be just as relevant if Pope Leo said it this morning. This is important because Catholic elementary and middle schools are one of the Church's powerful evangelical expressions, bringing the Word of God and the sword of Spirit to children. The mission takes shape in every aspect of the school, bringing Christ in math and phys ed, engaging annoying parents like me, in hiring a cafeteria manager, in deciding whether to rely on an advisory board or an executive board for making key decisions. Tonight we aim to discuss three items specifically: curriculum, recruiting local leadership, and communicating a mission and vision. Each of the panelists brings something unique from these pillars to the table, along with a personal story of finding success in Catholic education. They're not here to promote individual schools, but to share their mission-driven passion for teaching Christ. Karen Solano is the curriculum director at St. Benedict's, an independent school that was founded less than 10 years ago with a unique curriculum and now has a standing wait list. Karen also believes in the value of diocesan schools and serves on the board of St. Joseph's in Medford. Hassan Ahmad is taking on the role of development enrollment for the Sparhawk Academy, an all-boys school founded 8 years ago on an empty piece of farmland in Millis, now expanding to a high school, providing professional education and entrepreneurship modules to other schools and leadership training. Christine Najarian had recruited and actually had been mentoring Hassan over the last year, spending time knowing that he would be leaving. So that kind of gift is amazing. And she's been leading and organizing an executive board of specified jurisdiction at a blue ribbon diocesan school. The Board Development Institute and other diocesan contacts all recommended separately. I contacted them and they said, "Oh, you have to get Christine here." And that she come and speak to the wonders and challenges of an executive board that require constant development and is just as applicable in sustaining an advisory board. So what unites them all is how they've involved parents and the wider community in a shared mission, one that always comes back to this: we teach Christ. We're so thankful for their willingness to be open and share some insight into what has worked and what hasn't worked in their roles. It's not about one right way. Tonight is about sparking discussion, networking, and collaboration among Catholic elementary leaders, teachers, and parents. The methods are rooted in tradition but are open to fresh expression wherever God leads. To kick off our discussion and introduce our panelists, please welcome our moderator, Father Michele. His teachings of science and theology at Bishop Fenwick, pretty cool, science and theology, exemplifies a life of faith and reason, bringing it every day into the classroom and into his ministry to teens. So as the conversations progress, it will become clear the challenges are many, and it makes us all uncomfortable to be facing them. There's a popular Navy SEAL veteran, Jocko Willink, some of you might know him, a lot of you probably don't, but that he always says the same answer when he faces a challenge: good. Because he knows that the challenge will help him grow. And that puts Jocko and Pope Benedict on the same page, because Pope Benedict said we weren't made for comfort, but for greatness. So please welcome Father Michele and our panelists.
Thank you very much. I'm very honored to be here and to talk to you, and I'm just moderating here, but I want to say that I hope this conversation is not a NIASC visit in which we get bored with educational lingo. It is not going to be, but I invite you warmly to speak from the heart, because here you have a collection of people that want to hear and interact with the heart. Because the issue about education is not about the corporate world, but it's about life or death for us, for all of us, for me in particular, but for the families and the people who are here. But I want to start with one of my favorite TV shows is The Office. I don't know if you know The Office. And there's this scene in which there is one of the characters that doesn't know if he needs to break up with this girl, and so gathers all the girls, all the ladies of the office, and asks, what should I do? And they tell him, the first thing that you really think is the thing that you have in your mind is what you really believe. So, and he ends up breaking up with the woman. So I want to ask you a question that for us is crucial, and I want you to be at the beginning, like the first thing for you that is important. What is education? What is the goal of education? I'm going to ask the three of you to answer in one sentence or less, and then we're going to go over. I warned you.
2 minutes ago.
2 minutes ago. Yeah, that would have been too easy if I could.
I can start.
I'm not quite sure how to follow this two up, but I will say, I will defer your question by quoting someone else. I'll quote St. John Paul II when he said that the purpose of Catholic education in this age is to restore to humans the conviction that man can grasp the truth of things, and by doing so, serve God and neighbor. He said that in Veritatis and Splendor, and I think that remains true today.
Hey, Karen, how does your experience at St. Benedict help the students recognize their vocation?
Oh, their vocation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the fundamental human vocation our faith teaches us is to come to know, love, and serve Him in all that we do. That's our fundamental vocation. It's why we were made. So when you have that as the end of education, and you see that the reason children were made with the capacities where that all of us are made with the human capacities that we're made with, right? To know things, to ask questions, to wonder what is the truth, to love, to pray. All of those capacities have been given us by God for the purpose of fulfilling that vocation of coming to know, love, and serve Him, and being sort of spokespersons for creation to give glory to Him. And so everything, once you see that as the goal of education, is to use your human capacities to come to know the truth to their fullest, then everything you do in your curriculum kind of revolves around that end. So every material, every piece of our curriculum that we implement is always with that goal in mind. How is this leading them to the truth? How is this leading them to God? Whether it's science, how does science explore the wonders of God's creation and help them see the order, the orderliness of how God created the world and the providence that God has over creation? Or how does math reveal the divine mind to us, right? How does history unfold God's providential care of human beings and the church? So when we look at it through that lens, then every element of our curriculum can be oriented towards that goal of helping them to see how God is at work in their own lives, in the world around them, but then also how are they called to contribute back? How are they called to participate in this tradition of contributing to the quest for truth, contributing to the quest for wisdom, growing in virtue, growing in their faith. And so at St. Benedict, everything we do kind of revolves around those ends.
And Sana, how does your work help to students and the community at large to seek that truth?
Yeah, I can speak to this in two ways, principally. One is my past experience, both as a religion teacher in a parochial middle school, St. Peter's in Cambridge, where I would say probably 80% of the students were not Catholic. And some of my best students, frankly, were not Catholic. And I was just, how do I say this? They were so used to being told that they're going to school so that they'll get into a good high school, good thing to do, get into a good college, nothing against that, and you know, if they want, they can choose between being an investment banker, a lawyer, a physicist, or a doctor, all good choices, I mind you. So it is ultimately a picture of life that I think is very nihilistic, that it places the meaning, the locus of meaning. I mean, as adults, we you know, people often come to senses that the locus, having your locus of meaning in something so transient is very dangerous. It leads to nihilism. But even I think children can clock this. So even non-religious students, when they were in my class, were so hungry to engage with the Catholic tradition. We learned, I started them off with Aristotle, so we learned some metaphysics. These are 7th graders, 8th graders. And I didn't just throw the physics and became the ethics at them, but I translated it for them in language they could understand. And we went through different things, the 7th, 8th grade curriculum, the virtues, scripture, the sacraments. But at graduation, I remember a self-proclaimed atheist student of mine saying to me, "Mr. Ahmad, your class was the best class I've taken ever, that I've ever had." And I don't know why he felt that for what it's worth, but he says it. I assume he's telling the truth, not just flattering me. He's like, I didn't know what I didn't know. And it was amazing. Another one of these students who was baptized Catholic and was also didn't come from a religious family. I was at his confirmation yesterday. One of 3 students I was a confirmation sponsor for yesterday. And his dad told me, we were speaking after the Mass, and he said, well, my son, Eli, he just translated Aquinas' first way into language from using quantum mechanics in physics. He's a smart kid. But they're hungry for this stuff, and non-religious families would come and thank me and thank the headmaster there. So for that. So one is just really engaging this hunger for meaning. There's I think a real class in meaning, both for adults and for children today. So sorry for this long-winded answer. The second part of this I can speak, and I mean I could give you experiences like that at St. Mary's as well. But the second part of this, I think, speaks to Sparwalk, where I will be going in the summer. Their mission, I think, very clearly, which is to educate boys. That's their mission, to educate boys. And yeah, we all have a universal vocation to know and love God, and we're going to accomplish it in different ways. So for boys, that means teaching them the dignity of work, the dignity of the human person, what it means to serve God through your work, whether you're a carpenter or a doctor or anything in between or above or below or to the side of. And I think that is something that's fundamentally lacking in our current purview. I think our current models in education is educating boys, especially. They're falling behind in so many ways. So this ultimately just takes me to the last point, I promise you, which is that education is a deeply personal thing. It speaks to the human person. That's the locus of our dignity. And I think any sort of reform or renewal in education, in Catholic education especially, needs to be authentically Catholic and geared towards the persons of our students and their specific vocations as persons.
So I have a question for Karen, going back to the curriculum question. I think that I'm a physics and religion teacher, so of course what you said really struck me deeply. And the key concept for me is wonder there, right? It's wonder. What are some experiences in your school, in the way you teach, or other teachers teach, in which really students have experienced wonder?
I think the first thing is to recognize that what sparks wonder is the imagination, right? And that goes back to some of the Aristotelian anthropology, if you want to talk Aristotle, but it's sparking that imagination in them. So the first thing we try to do to cultivate wonder is giving them beautiful things to wonder about. We surround them with beautiful artwork. We surround them with great literature that sparks wonder. We make sure that our materials that we hand to them are worthy of being in their presence, and we present it as a gift to them that they can experience as a gift. We make sure our teachers are deeply curious people, so it goes back to the people we present to them. We make sure that they model in their own life a life of wonder, a life of lifelong curiosity and a desire to learn more. And then we use pedagogical practices that go back centuries in our tradition that are designed to cultivate wonder. We start by asking questions. We look to the model of Socrates, right, and even Christ, right? We use questioning, we use analogies, we invite them to make comparisons between different things. We incorporate things like poetry into our science classes, so they're reading poetry and they're looking at science, and there's actually been some really interesting research showing that actually helps and students understand scientific material even better, which is kind of interesting to think about. So we try to engage in all of these practices. So we want to fill their minds with beautiful images that they will carry with them. So we do expect them to sort of memorize things and hold in their minds these things that they might not understand. They might memorize it when they're in second grade, third grade. They might memorize a great poem or a psalm, and of course, none of us fully understand the Psalms, right? But it's something that years later, and I've definitely noticed this in my experience, my students, I teach 7th grade now, they'll come back and they'll remember what they memorized in 3rd grade, and now they have a deeper understanding of it because it's embedded in their heart and it's embedded in their memory. And so we try to go back to those practices which kind of go back to the purpose of education. You look in the history of the Western tradition and the Western approach to education, it's all about inspiring wonder. So we try to reclaim some of those practices that are designed specifically to cultivate wonder in students. And also speaking to Hassan's point, right, just moving away from a model of education that sees the end goal as primarily training for a job, right? Which is, of course, we want our students to go out well prepared, right, for the world and for college and for a job and a career. But beyond that, there's the further goal that we want to make sure they're prepared to meet, which is this desire to grow towards God. And so, cultivating the imagination is the first step, and beautiful materials, beautiful witnesses to the faith in front of them, and good pedagogical practices.
I have another question about curriculum, maybe you guys can help me. And because sometimes the question about curriculum is how the science leads to faith, right? But also is the other point to me is how the humanistic subject, first of all, that need to be taught. Also, they don't reduce themselves to science classes, right? We already have the science classes to do the science. So how do you protect the philosophical and theological depth of all these classes in your schools, or what do the right teachers do?
Could you say that question one more time so I can make sure it's...
So sometimes we just talk about the science classes to lead to faith, but sometimes I see that is the English class the real problem sometimes, because it brings forth, or it lacks the depth, the theological depth that is necessary. So what are some examples of this,
Maybe this will get to your question. I think we do try to make sure, in our humanities classes, it's going back to the root of what the humanities are about. Why are they called the humanities? Because they cultivate in us what is most human, right? So we try to make sure that we really kind of focus in on that specific thing. What is it that makes us human? And again, that goes back to our classical anthropology, right? Human beings are made with specific capacities that are unique to human beings, and that's what education is supposed to cultivate. One of those capacities is the capacity for language. And logic and reason. And so in our education, we really focus on helping our students master the art of using language well, right? Grammar, rhetoric, how do you craft a logical argument, all of those kinds of things are really embedded into what we teach. And then they are utilized in our humanities classes, first of all, in English, by giving them really high quality examples of beautiful writing, writing that has something to speak to about the human condition, that answers really good, that addresses really great questions about what it means to be a human being. We make sure we're giving them that kind of literature that has stood the test of time, that has spoken to many generations of people, that then we can give it to them and say, this can speak to you too. This is our gift to you. This is the gift of your inheritance. You know, we can give it to them in that way. And then when you give them those good materials, and then you give them the ability to understand how language works so they can really grapple with the text in a sophisticated way, then those philosophical questions kind of naturally arise. Those questions about, you know, virtue and vice and prudence and good decision making and, you know, what is the human condition, the problem of evil, all of these things that great literature addresses, that great historical study addresses. We can make sure that those are embedded in there. And then I think that really gives them the tools later on to go out into the world where not everything is so beautiful, obviously, right? But then they can recognize it. They can have an instinct for what is good. They can have an instinct for what is beautiful. And they can notice, you know, hey, there's something wrong with the world, and this is what it is. I've got this tradition to draw on that shaped my imagination, that shaped my personality, and now I can go out and confront the world in a way that brings truth and goodness and beauty into the world.
Thank you. Christina, a question for you. Maybe this is not your experience, but it could be in a school in which you have lots of teachers on different ideological, even educational philosophies on different levels, right? So how do you mentor teachers to align with the mission of the school and in a way that inspires them?
So when I first became principal, I think, you know, just naturally in Catholic education, there is a higher turnover rate. So a couple teachers have left. I didn't even meet them at that time. They were leaving, and so I was very intentional on who we hired. You know, we did partner at some point with the St. Thomas More Fellow, so we mentored a lot of St. Thomas More Fellows, including Hassan, and as apprentices, as teachers, and they really did help shape and shift the culture of the school. They helped in supporting that. And then in every hire, we always, we're very upfront. We share our values and our beliefs as a school and as a church. And they have, I see one of our teachers that used to teach at St. Mary's here, so. And so they have they have that understanding from the beginning, and we've set that expectation. And then when so what was the second part? So it was just, that's how we hired. Yeah. We hired new teachers. We were very intentional with who we hired and who we continue to hire. For example, and we're always trying to be innovative as a school. We're trying to find ways in which not only are we hiring the right people, but also, I mean, in terms of development, how are we, it's all related. So I can speak about this from all angles. I mean, just, you know, bringing in grants to the school, bringing in money, you know, making partnerships so that the school can be financially stable, and then you can now hire staff that are no longer part-time, but now you can have like a full-time staff when it comes to like specials, for example, right? For example. So just to give you an example of someone we just hired, she, I believe, was a St. Thomas More Fellow in the past. And now we no longer have part-time like Spanish teachers or part-time music teachers, part-time art teachers. We are now transitioning to full-time, which allows us to get, you know, to get better talent and also who we would want to be on staff. So this one person that we hired for next year, she is going to be our pre-K through 8 art teacher, and she's also going to teach theology for 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade, and 8th grade. And she's going to be in charge of doing a lot of the pastoral work at the school as well. Had we not had that strong financial basis, we wouldn't have been able to hire this type of talent. And I remember when she came in for the demo lesson, it was all about wonder. And it was so inspiring to see. And I can't believe that now, like, the school is at a place where we can now, instead of having that part-time timer who needs more money, that needs to rely on more money, instead of having that and that constant discussion, challenging discussion with them, now we can hire someone full-time who's part of our faculty, full-time faculty who will be attending all our professional development sessions and really being part of the school community.
I have a quick follow-up. What about, because it's a struggle for adults to let themselves always be open to be trained, to become, to be open to the mystery of these kids, the mystery of what we teach. How do you train the teacher to remain open to their job?
I can say something.
Well, I mean, I could say one or two things about that. One is that I think Christine or Dr. Jordan does an absolutely fantastic job at this. And that's actually one thing that I've seen that St. Mary's really sets St. Mary's apart, is that there's not a single meeting that wastes a teacher's time. Every single meeting is carefully curated and designed to be an effective use of the teacher's time. That requires a lot of planning up front from the administrative team, which is also pretty lean for the amount of work it does. Colton Sheen says that we should all have the idea in our mind to work to the utmost of our ability, and I think that's well exemplified in the office at St. Mary's. And the other thing I will just say is on mission, communication, and marketing. I think one way I've seen the leadership at St. Mary's really just flourish is utilizing everyone in the school, be it the teachers, be it teacher assistants, be it, of course, the administration, and even parents and students in the school's outreach efforts. That is communicating the school's mission, the wonderful things that are happening at the school through high-quality marketing materials to both the outside community, prospective parents. So I think finding ways to create synergies, right? So using teachers' times effectively, but also in ways that, help the financial situation of the school and its outreach, I think are paramount. So
I think I would like to add on to that. So when I first became principal, I realized the importance of marketing. And St. Mary's was a little gem of a school. Everyone who knew about St. Mary's would be like, oh, that's a cute school. I've heard some things about it. But I really wanted to make it, what I was witnessing and seeing in the school, I wanted it to shine. And I wanted it for the whole world to see what is going on at St. Mary's. And so, first year principal, here I was running around. I don't think we had a development director or a marketing person. And so I was running around with my camera, going from class to class. And then I was like, there has to be a different way to do this. And so I invented this new idea where teachers were required to put once a week, were required to put a Google Calendar invite for, it could be a boring math lesson, it could be a fun activity they're doing outside, innovative, it could be an event, and it would be a shared Google Calendar amongst all of our faculty. It was called the Classroom Activities Calendar, Classroom Lessons and Activities. And till this day, and by the way, going back to hiring, I would always make this clear that if you were to take on this role, you would be involved with the marketing. You would be involved with inviting administrative members to come up to your classroom once a week. This is the expectation. And then the administrative team, whether it's myself, our administrative assistant, our assistant principal would come up and take pictures of what's going on. So not only is it so that we can market it, but we can also showcase the beautiful work that you're doing as a faculty member, as well as for us, instead of just micromanaging and asking for lesson plans every week, we're actually in the classrooms, we're involved, we're seeing what is going on in the classrooms. And in terms of enrollment, sometimes and now with our director of enrollment, who's also participating in these classroom activities, So all of us as a team know exactly what's going on in the school. And so when a prospective family is coming to tour, I can easily share, like you should have saw how the pre-K students were learning about the life cycle of the butterfly and learning all about metamorphosis. And so this really allowed us, so just putting on this shared Google Calendar now has had teachers invested in the marketing of the school as well. And sometimes if they do forget, they'll just send me, not that I want just the blurb or the pictures, because I love for the team to go up to the classrooms, but I understand sometimes it gets really hard and it's really challenging with time. And so they will send me, every Friday I'm sending out the Principal's Weekly newsletter. And that Principal's Weekly newsletter is not just going out to our parents, it's going out to donors, it's going out to prospective parents, it's going out to members of the Catholic Schools Foundation, Catholic Schools Office, other school leaders, and so they know how important it is, and so they will send me pictures and a blurb in case they didn't get the chance or maybe an administrative team member didn't get the chance to go up to the classroom. So I think that has helped the school significantly because now also sorry Sharon, now prospective parents who were touring were more likely, and so we grew in enrollment. When I first started 4 years ago, we were at 196, now we're at 250. And so we grew in enrollment and in development, which made it possible to hire talented faculty and staff members.
A question I want to ask you, all of you, and you can go this way. What drives change in a Catholic institution? Is it always like the perfect principal and everybody, or there can be a model from some teachers who take initiatives, or what do you think drives change? Because sometimes we feel the need for change and a little bit stuck at times.
I think what drives change is always actually a return to our mission, and it's a constant revisiting of our mission and making sure that we're reviewing that to see if, because the goal is to stay on mission, and so what drives change is to kind of evaluate how far we've strayed from that and try to make sure that we're moving back towards our mission. So that's really the driver of any kind of new initiative that we have, and it's about evaluating the needs of our students, right? So we kind of look at where our students are, and so okay, what does this population of students that we're dealing with right now, what do we need to tweak in our systems to bring them back to our mission and to help them be in alignment with our mission? So sometimes, and it's collaborative always. It's we make sure we bring on great people. We bring on people who know their subject matter, who know what the mission of education is, and they often have the best ideas. So it's developing a collaborative environment where those ideas are open and we're listening to the faculty, we're listening to their ideas. Okay, in this domain, we're not really on mission. How are we going to get it back there? Maybe we need to have a new program. Maybe we need to do a curriculum reevaluation. Maybe we need to build up a more robust professional development around this topic. So I think that's really, it's ironically, right, change is always driven by a return to our roots.
Great. Yeah, I would completely agree with that. I also think it depends what sort of change are you talking about, right? Is it what the magnitude of this change is going to lead to sort of a different origin, I think. I do think that ultimately lasting institutional change has to come from a committed pastor and a mission-oriented and strategic principal or head of school. I think there's really there's no substitute for that, at least as far as I have seen. But that doesn't mean that there aren't modes and channels for communicating new ideas from faculty. Absolutely, you should always have that, right? There should always be channels for faculty to communicate new ideas, and basically, in the business world, this is called strategic control, right? So when you create a strategic plan, you set out to operate, sort of execute it. You then have to see what worked and what didn't work, right? And you have, luckily at schools, you have, people in the classroom who are constantly experiencing whether it worked or not, and parents as well. Everyone ultimately has to work together for lasting change, but I think having a committed principal and pastor is key. I think in addition to that, you have to invite people from the parent community or from outside that are knowledgeable, that bring with them certain key competencies that can help your school. So that's where we get into the question of boards, right? Or sort of special groups for certain projects. At Sparhawk, I'm currently working with Mike Shell, the headmaster, as well as certain sort of key faculty and other outsiders. One of them a parent, the other the former dean of the CUA Business School on an entrepreneurship program, right? So on creating an entrepreneurship program for the high school that is really going to be a key differentiator for the Sparhawk experience, and it's going to have Catholic social teaching. It's going to have this sort of perennial idea of the dignity of work all the way through it. But how do you build that? That's a huge project to do, and you need different people with different expertise there. But where does it start? It starts with, the idea can be had by anyone, but the person who starts execution is usually a committed pastor or and a cognizant principal.
Just to piggyback on what Hassan said, so I meet with Father Jonathan Gaspar. I'm sure many of you know him. He is our pastor at St. Mary's. I meet with him every week on Mondays at 1 p.m. We never cancel our meetings. And if one of us cancels the meetings, then it's the other one will laugh at that person. Because we are very consistent. We have to always be on the same page. We are one team. And I think it does trickle down, that unity does trickle down to our administrative team, faculty, students, parents. So I think just that collaboration is the most important in the school. Today, just to give you an example of our professional development that we had today. We started off with data-driven analysis. We are finishing up our curriculum mapping for the year. And then we did some housekeeping things that can't really be shared in an email because we always ask for buy-in from faculty. And so, so one of the questions was, parents are requesting that we change the uniform pants for 5th grade through 8th grade. So we asked all infant through grade 8 students, faculty members, what are your thoughts on that? And what is it that you would like to see? What is it that your students like, what they don't like? We're always trying to have some sort of buy-in from the faculty, and they're not involved in all the decisions, but now that we have them before the summer comes, we really, throughout the school year, try to engage them and not just make decisions without having them know what is going on. And then we also, this is a tough part of the year where we have to survey parents. And it's usually positive feedback, but of course sometimes there's honest feedback that is not so great. And so, but taking that into heart, always thinking that there's always wanting to better. So if there's a constructive criticism or remark, to not just eye roll it away, but there's probably some truth behind that, and we need to work on fixing this as a team. And it really does take a village. When we were offered to apply for the National Blue Ribbon School through Council for American Private Education, they nominated us to apply for the National Blue Ribbon School. It really was a team effort. So I went home, I put all the data into the application, and then I filled in, okay, so our apprentice principal, you're going to do this, assistant principal, you'll do this, director of finance and operations, you're going to do this, we're going to work together as a team, we're going to meet weekly as a team, and we're going to get this very intensive application in. And then it was just, we kept on being pushed from one level to the next. And so it really is buy-in, so going back to it, it's buy-in from the administrative team, buy-in from the faculty, buy-in from parents, students, etc.
Can I add one more thing to that? Just right now, Christine and I are working on, with a parent, on a community garden project to touch up what used to be part of an old playground structure that was taken away last year. And it's just mulch now on the ground. But this parent is so involved in the school, she feels such a part of the community that she's willing to give her time to make this project possible, right? And there's many things at the school at St. Mary's that really, we couldn't do without buy-in from our parents. But the way you do that, I think the way that is built, it has to be an ongoing, year-round effort to create parent community through mission, through leading with mission clarity and being on mission, and then that community pays dividends through people giving their time and talents. And the same thing at Sparhawk with a number of their initiatives.
I have a question for you. It's a couple of questions, a bit more personal if you want, or touching more personal things. The first one is this. How do you encourage teachers who maybe are struggling with certain things, so they're revealed in their weaknesses in certain things, to seek mentorship? Or how have you dealt with that in your career as educator? For me, they sent me here from Italy to America to teach. My superior was completely crazy. He asked me to teach 5 classes. I barely spoke English, and my first year of teaching in high school was a tragedy. I slept for a month after that year of school, but I have to say, that year I received the best mentorship I've ever had in the rest of my 15 years plus career as a teacher. So how do you take people out of the fake, everything's good and I'm going to go, and actually build communities that sustain the work of people? Maybe Karen start.
I think what we do really well at St. Benedict is we do have a very strong faculty community. And I think, the first thing on a very practical level is to provide low stakes opportunities for feedback. So we have 2 great, a new teacher comes into our school, they're already paired with a mentor that they're expected to be with from the very beginning of their time here. Whether they are coming to us as a veteran teacher, if they're new to our community, they're paired with somebody who's been in our community for a while. So there's that natural peer mentorship, which I think is a little less pressure to hide your weaknesses. It's not evaluative, it's just, how do I do things around here? We have a pretty robust observation system of faculty observation that starts below the level of the principal. So we have lower tier admins who come in and see, and again, that's a low stakes environment. It's just an opportunity, and they know it's going to happen on a weekly basis. We're in your classrooms, we're observing, we're giving feedback, and just providing, and then as we notice things along the way, we provide suggestions along the way for, okay, it seems like, this might be an area of growth for you. Here's some resources that you can look into. We'll follow up with you about how you access those resources. And then we have a pretty good professional development program. One thing I wanted to say too about our professional development is that all of our teachers, regardless of what they teach, are expected to attend our professional development sessions. So our English teachers are expected to come to our math PDs, and our math teachers are expected to come to our history PDs. And it's in part because certain pedagogical strategies are universal, right? So you can learn from a math teacher how to teach certain things in other classes, but also we want our students, our teachers again, to have that intellectual curiosity. It's not good enough for an English teacher to say, I'm not a math person, or I don't like science. It's like, no, that's not the kind of student we want our students to be. We want our students to be curious about everything, and even if they're not naturally good at something, we want them to see the beauty and wonder in it. So we expect that of our faculty as well. And so I think, and even those moments, which kind of naturally cultivate some discomfort for teachers, it's like, I'm not really good at that, and I've got to put that kind of on display. But it creates a culture where it's okay to admit, I'm not perfect at this, and I can seek help in these domains. And so, again, we want our teachers to be models for our students of the kinds of people we want them to be. Part of that is having intellectual humility. And so we try to incorporate practices in our school that encourage intellectual humility and professional humility, right? We don't expect any teacher to be perfect. And I think, honestly, too, what our headmaster has done really well is be the model of that for our faculty. It's just being willing to admit when he's wrong about something, being willing to admit when he doesn't know the answer and he needs somebody else's advice, and just being up there and being willing to share that with the full faculty. It gives them the courage to have that as well and say, okay, I need help here. What are some resources that can help me? So I think it works well.
Before we continue, just a housekeeping matter. We collected questions from the public later on in our Q&A, so if you want to write a question, we can read them later. And I think Gabrielle is going to collect them in the back. Sorry, let's go back.
Can you repeat the question?
So the question was about weaknesses. How do you foster a culture in which people, don't have to put a mask, that they have everything figured out. And so that,
Yeah, I don't know how much I could actually add to that, but,
We can talk a little bit about the ILPs.
oh yeah, absolutely, that's a good point, I could add to that. So we have, I mean, at St. Mary's, there is the instructional leadership team, right? So this meets, I think they meet once a week. Once a week, yeah, recently, with our assistant principal, who's really in charge of curriculum, and we're doing a huge curriculum mapping project. We have been doing it over the last few years. It's, again, produced some really great results, again, with just clarity and planning are, you know, indispensable. But it leads to a lot of conversations, I think, about where where the gaps are, right? And also, and it requires both the people on the team as well as teachers who are contributing to the curriculum mapping project be able to be honest with each other as to where the gaps are. So I mean, fundamentally, it comes to goodwill, you know, for fraternity between teachers and having a culture that isn't hostile or antagonistic. Again, it goes for granted here, but you know, once you have that and you institutionalize it, you give it a structure. I think people are much more willing to kind of be open in a structural setting.
I think, so going back to the ILPs, instructional leadership team, we have 2 teachers now that are currently taking on this role. We have one 5th grade teacher and one pre-K teacher. So one teacher that is representing the early childhood team through like early elementary, and another teacher that is upper elementary and middle school. And so they meet with our assistant principal every Monday after school, and they not only go over curriculum mapping, but also they'll bring up some other challenges that may be coming up for other teachers, and so then we are giving them those 2 mentors. Who are faculty members are now receiving leadership opportunities as well. And that's something that I can also speak about later. And so we have the ILT team, and then we also have PLCs, professional learning communities, and that is something we do every other week with our assistant principal. Sometimes if I have the time, I'll also join in as well. So we have grouped our classes or grades into cohorts. And so there's there's the pre-K cohort, K1 cohort, K2 first grade, second grade, third grade, second grade, third grade, and then fourth grade, fifth grade, and then middle school. So that is when our assistant principal and myself will meet with the teachers, and we'll either do curriculum mapping or we'll follow up with another like differentiated learning, professional development all together. And then sometimes it's just housekeeping things, right? So we don't have to rely on bringing up housekeeping things into faculty meetings. And so that has been very, very effective. And it's also been allowed for teachers to give us some feedback and some clarity on our leadership as well. We also do have monthly new teachers. So new teachers that are new to teaching at St. Mary's. They don't necessarily have to be new teachers, but if they are new to teaching at St. Mary's, we do have monthly new teacher meetings as well with them, so that in case they have any questions, and then we also go over things from discipline, policy, and curriculum all together with them. But I really, just going back to that question, it really does stem from leadership. So when the administrative team is professional, it does trickle down to the faculty and to the students and parents and so forth.
so our question, the title of this talk is We Teach Christ. And of course you cannot really teach Christ because Christ is a presence. You cannot really teach Christ as you teach how to find the components of a vector or the projectile motion, because Christ either is alive and present, so it's completely meaningless because it's a person who died 2,000 years ago. So the personal question for you is this: where have you met him? Where have you met Christ in your work as educators? What is one experience, a moment in which you were in front of him?
I'll dive into that. I think, again, my school is a classical school, so I think about it in terms of a lot of classical philosophy. So, going back again to how the ancients thought about human knowledge, right? I think our schools rightly focus on the cultivation of reason, right? How do you think clearly? How do you make logical arguments? How do you, do math and science and write logical essays? But there's another type of knowledge that the ancients talk about that our faith tradition also tells us, which is the intellect. It's just this intuitive knowledge that you can come to through reason, right? You kind of reason your way, but it's that eureka moment of, aha, I get it. And I think we've all experienced that when we worked on a really hard math problem and then all of a sudden the solution becomes clear. Or some problem has presented it to us in our morality and then we realize this is what I was supposed to do, right? We've all had those aha moments or those eureka moments. They can come to us in our intellectual life, but I think the knowledge of Christ kind of falls into that domain of the intellect, of those aha moments where everything that you've learned and all of your experience become integrated into an encounter with the truth that you can't help but recognize as true. And that is what faith is ultimately about, and that's how I see education as sort of leading us to faith. If we can help our students cultivate their reason, and really actually, the goal of education in our view is kind of to get to the limits of reason, to see, okay, reason can get us this far, but there's the presence of Christ, there's that presence, that intellectual moment of encounter that is beyond where our reason can bring us. And so I see that so many times with our students. Again, I work with our older students in the school, and I see it when, for instance, our curriculum is cyclical, so they study the same historical time period twice in the course of their K through 8, our first grade through 8th grade program at our school. And to see them as 7th graders studying medieval history again, and then being like, I never realized X, Y, or Z. I didn't realize how this event connected to this event, this connected to it. And that's a moment where they start saying, and who is the one overseeing all of it, right? Who is the one that's got the big picture in mind, And so bringing them to those aha moments is the way that we help them to encounter Christ. And I see it personally in my students when that experience leads them to prayer. That's the ultimate end for us. And what's been I don't think any of us can take credit for it. I really do think it's the Lord at work. But when our middle school students start asking, can we pray the Liturgy of Hours before and after school? They ask for it. When we have 5 or 6 priests come in for confession once a month, and that's not enough priests over 2 hours of time to see all the kids who want to go to confession. For me, when we have vocations talks come in and the kids have so many questions about what does it take to become a priest, or how can I become a monk, or how can I be a sister of life, right? When they have this deep craving to really start asking those questions about their vocation, that's how I know our educational mission has been fulfilled. And I know also that none of us can take credit for that it's the Holy Spirit at work in what we're doing. So.
Yeah, absolutely. That's beautiful. I think in a parochial school setting, that it's gonna look a little different. I think in the kind of nitty gritty of it, but I think in the parochial school setting, where you have often lots of students who are not religious, who come from non-religious families, sometimes making up the majority of schools, depending on the school. In my experience, that sort of encounter with Christ happens almost like on the road to Emmaus, where you see someone, the disciples see Christ, and they don't recognize who he is, or Mary Magdalene after the resurrection is another good example. They don't realize who they're speaking to, and by having an organization that is first Christ-centered, right? The purpose, but Benedict said, the purpose of Catholic education, Catholic schools, is really to see yourself as an arm of the Great Commission. That's the mission of the Church. That's also ultimately the mission of Catholic schools. And I would amend, I would amend this a little bit to say that Christ is not just an idea or even a presence, but he's a person, right? He's a person. So it's an encounter with the person. It's also an encounter with the type of person they could be, right? We're all called to imitate Christ. And I think when students really encounter the latter, right, the kind of person they could be, that is, as St. Paul says, I do not act, but it's not I who live, but Christ who lives in me. it's that. They get a little glimpse of that. And that changes, that will change a student. That will turn a student who had no aims, no ambition, didn't want to go to school, into your best student. That will turn your, your behavioral problem into an A student. And it's a light switch. And that's what we're trying to turn on in kids, is that, again, it goes back to meaning. It goes back to purpose. That, in the Sparhawk language, and what we're using in Sparhawk is, you're the CEO of your life. We want Christ as the COO. You're going to partner. You're partnering with Christ. To live your life, flourish, and serve God. And it's just the whole environment needs to work. You don't know where kids might encounter him. They might encounter him, with an interaction with the facility staff. They might encounter him with their students in a discussion. It happens all the time. They might encounter him in your class or someone else's class, or in the office, or a disciplinary conversation. The students that we're trying to lead to an encounter with Christ, our principal partners in education are families. That's who we're serving. We're serving families. So, all this to say is we need to create, as school leaders, we need to create an environment in our schools that is, I think, totally Christ-centered. Now, that doesn't mean every subject is theology or religion. It certainly isn't that, as you know well, Father. But that in everything they see Christ's light, Christ's truth, and in everything they do, they have a chance to encounter the person of Christ.
Today I led the faculty and staff during PD on a reflection on the letter to the Galatians by St. Paul the Apostle for chapter 6, verse 9. And it really does piggyback after what you're saying, Hassan. So it states, "So let us not grow weary in doing what is right, for we will reap at harvest time if we do not give up." So I'll read that again. "So let us not grow weary in doing what is right, for we will reap at harvest time if we do not give up." Like you said, sometimes we do not see what the seeds that we plant right away. It takes time. Something that if some of you teach, or if some of you are leading schools, I think something that was very effective that we did this year was we started Bible in a year by Father Mike Schmitz all together as a faculty, and it's been very incredible. Are you?
Yeah, I'm on my third time around.
Okay. I think we're on like day 200, I'm a couple of days behind. I haven't been at home. But however, it's been really incredible to see the faculty members that have been partaking in the Bible in the year. And it's not the faculty members that you would have maybe just thought, right? It's faculty members that may not come from a religious background, or faculty members that have had some challenges in teaching religion, and so they've stuck to it. And it's been so nice to go around. I know which faculty members have continued to listen to Bible in a year, and then every day or every once a week, just whenever I see them in passing, whether they're in their classroom or in the hallway, we'll speak about the scripture passages that were mentioned that week or that day, and also reflect on it as well. So that has helped a lot, and it is because now the faculty members are, learning more about the faith, and now they know how to teach the faith even better, and they're more passionate about teaching the faith to their students.
They can be role models.
Yes.
And I think that's another place where students really encounter Christ, is their teachers being role models for that.
So the priest and me needs to ask you a question. What is the place of the liturgy in a community? Because I think this is a crucial point, to go back to the wonder, that if we teach the students and we only limit ourselves to push a program, right? Push an agenda, whatever that is, to get our outcomes, even if it's a Catholic agenda, we are teaching in a non-Catholic way. Because the ultimate way to learn is really rest, in a sense, to really leisure in a good way, like to experience those truths in a way that please the heart and opens up the heart. And so what is the place of the liturgy in your communities and or experiences this way that open up the heart? You know, this way? Sure.
I'm going to say something here, and I mean, I don't mean to be controversial, but kids have a very, I would say, sensitive BS meter. They know kitschy, nonsense that's catered to them at the lowest common denominator. They joke about it afterwards, and I hear it. And I mean, the liturgy really should be a place for an experience for them to encounter the majesty of God, right? So that means I think students respond so well. Boys especially respond so well to a reverent liturgy that they have, access to regularly. A reverent liturgy that really pulls from the deep well of Catholic tradition. And they can smell out anything else. So I think especially, by the time they become even kind of, 4th, 5th grade, I would really say just, take them to have a reverent liturgy for them regularly, like you would for adults, and they can participate in it. They can get something. They can get spiritual nourishment from it. They don't need curated kids masses with very dubious characters and etc. Like things being dumbed down for them. They don't need anything really dumbed down for them.
The first mass that I said at my school, I found a Snoopy dog stall.
Don't do that, please. No Snoopy dog stalls. They won't make fun of it.
Which really made me.
They're gonna make fun of it. I'm sure they did make fun of it. So it's sad to say. I mean, it's not. I'm not saying it's joyful, but they need reverent liturgy that they can go back to. We all do, and that. Yeah, I mean, the council, the Great Council, said that it's the source and summit of the Christian life, and we have to take that seriously.
I'd build on that too and just say, again, I always go back to what is the purpose of education. And as Catholics, we believe that one of our fundamental things you're created to do, I mean, St. Augustine talks about it, right, is you're created to pray, right? It's a deep human need. And I have taught in environments where there are not very many Catholic students. Even then, prayer, they still crave silent time or time to reflect and time to relate to God. However, at that point in their life history, they were thinking about God. They crave that time to connect. And so I think we're made for that, and our education is supposed to help. Again, our education is supposed to fulfill all the things that we are made to do. So part of that is to help them learn to pray. And getting back to the imagination piece, everything that I think I've said so far, education is about cultivating a sacramental imagination, seeing God's hand at work in the world around them, which ultimately leads us right back to the sacraments and right back to liturgy. And it is the source of everything that we do. And I love your point, Hassan, about reverence, about, again, they don't want something that is entertainment for them. They want something where they can touch the transcendent, where they can have their desire to worship and to pray be nourished by the liturgies that they're given. And I've seen that true, at our school, which has a very high Catholic population, but I've seen that at places where that's not true. That desire to pray and to be in touch with the transcendent and to have reverence. And that's also part of what our education is for, right? Cultivating an imagination where they can see the hand of God in all things, which naturally leads to liturgy and sacrament.
Non-Catholic students, I will say, at places I've been, have been so deeply touched by a reverent liturgy.
Yeah.
Versus one that lacks certain elements of reverence. So it's like any other concert they've ever been to, being, but a deep encounter with Christ in a reverent liturgy,
We
Catholic,
had
non-Catholic, it doesn't matter.
we had a Muslim family at my school, and they asked them, what is the most beautiful thing about your school? And they all were afraid and said, the Mass.
This reminds me of during the Advent season, St. Mary's has the Orate Mass. Have any of you attended that at St. Mary's? It's a traditional Catholic Mass where they light up. How many candles do they light up? Is there a certain amount? It's a Mass that takes place in darkness, It starts at like 6:45 in the morning, or 6:30?
Yes.
And then it gets out by a little bit past 7. And the mass is just so reverent. It's so traditional. They have chanting, and so we've done a push for our middle school students to attend. And then last year, I think one of our middle school students, this is a beautiful story. So she ended up going to the Rorate Mass, and I think she was just so inspired that she ended up becoming a weekly parishioner. She would come to Mass without her parents, and a weekly parishioner, and now she is at a parish. So she graduated, and now she is at a parish, and she is teaching religious ed for many young children. And it's been such an inspiration to see. So going back to the importance, I believe the importance of the traditional masses. I was raised Roman Catholic, but I was actually, my husband and I were married in the Malachite Church, so the Greek Catholic Church, and that's something, just the evening prayers, Compline, Vespers, the Byzantine chants or the Gregorian chants. It's really what I believe brings you closer to our God.
We're gonna watch a video, right, Justin? Justin wants us to see, and then after this, we're gonna take questions from.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's so many. We can spend all night, and
Yeah.
they've given us so much time, and it's really amazing what you have all offered. And really, this is just a taste of what we're hoping to get people to have the next steps, to have some tools that they would be able to eventually apply programs. So one of the programs that Principal Christine had been in touch with me through was through the Board Development Institute. So there's flyers in the back. The Board Development Institute is a place that you can take 2-hour classes for a few months if you're looking to help with schools. And that's a great way to kind of get some extra tools. As a lay person, you don't ever want me speaking about education up here because I don't know anything about it. But I do appreciate what everybody's doing, and there are other ways that maybe you have talents that you can contribute. Another place that you can do this is with the Institute of School and Board Development, which Father Chris Hines, I know Principal Andrea at St. Joe's, has taken classes over there, and Faustin Weber is a great friend of Jay Warren at St. Benedict's, and he is going to be training and speaking with some of them soon. So this is just, we're not going to go through 10. We're going to do 10 minutes, and you're just going to get the first principle that Faustin Weber, whom is, I would highly recommend checking him out on LinkedIn. He posts every day, and if you read this stuff every day, and then like someone's you're able to apply 1% of it, it'd be helpful. So just wanted to give you some tools here that you may be able to follow up with.
If you would have asked me in my first 10 years or so, or if you would have told me, Boston, you need to spend more time thinking about your language and what you use for our schools, I would have looked at you like you were stark raving mad. Like, that's a luxury that I can't afford. And by the way, who cares, right? But I've come to believe that the most important thing we do as principals and as leaders is build a culture. And the way you build a culture is first by being very intentional about your language and very intentional about what you're trying to do. So this is kind of my attempt to kind of lay out what I think we have to do as leaders of our schools for us to kind of survive and go forward. So in the Huba app, you'll see this quote, and I wanted to start with Pope Francis because I love his optimism, right? Because we are looking at statistics which are bad, right? Since the middle of the 1960s, there were 12,000 schools. There's less than 6,000 now. There were 5 million students. We got about 1.7 million now. And yet, Pope Francis tells us not to be robbed of our missionary vigor. And I'm optimistic, despite those stats, about the future of Catholic schools. And I want to tell you why. This is my all too quick view of history, right? Since the sisters left us, began leaving us in the 1960s, right, we can talk about a whole host of things, right? The charism and their training that we lost, their witness, their example, their visible presence, all of that was a huge loss to us. We had to hire lay teachers where we have to pay different salaries. That drove the cost of tuition up, right? So that's a factor. Some of our schools were built in once thriving neighborhoods, but now they're kind of zombie neighborhoods because the demographics have changed. There's a lot more competition. I started in Montgomery. In Montgomery, if you had a church of over 500 people, you started your own school. We had something like 37 private schools in Montgomery and it was like 180,000 people. Here we are, Catholic High. So all those things are true, right? That's all explained why we've lost so many schools and students. But let's not forget that the major thing that's changed, the major thing is that the culture has changed. Arguably since 313 and the Edict of Milan, when Constantine made Christianity the official religion of the Roman Empire, our families in the past have grown up in a Judeo-Christian world, right? And even if they were nominally Catholic, the current of this Judeo-Christian world swept everyone downstream. Even if you were nominally Catholic. But that's clearly changed in the last 50 years, right? The current is at best stagnant, so you have to paddle your own way. And at worst, the current's going the other direction. Because there are some traditional Catholic and Christian values now that in some circles are seen as bigoted positions. But Karl Rahner in 1974 wrote this book called The Shape of the Church to Come. Usually Karl Rahner is woefully difficult to read, pages and pages without verbs. But a 135-page book called The Shape of the Church to Come, and he predicts the future of the church in a very prophetic-like way. He says, because we're no longer part of Judeo-Christian culture, these nominal Catholics, these nominal Christians will fade away, and what will be left will be a much smaller church, which he called the little flock. But he was actually hopeful about that. He said, because these are the people that have made the conscious decision to be Christian. These are the people that really want to live out the faith. And I believe that we have a lot of those parents now in our schools. And that we can do a lot of good with those parents in living out our faith and being excellent as Catholic schools. I met a mother last week. She was transferring her kids in from the Plano public schools. Prince of Peace is in Plano, which is just north of Dallas. And Plano has good public schools. So I asked her, why are you making this transfer? I think she had a 6th grader and a 3rd grader. And I was kind of stunned by the clarity of her answer. She said, the schools are good. I have no objection to what Plano is teaching my kid, except I realize my most important task as a parent is getting my kids to heaven. And I want to put them in a school environment that helps me do that. Bam. That was a beautifully succinct summary, right? And I think we have a lot of those parents now. So I have reason for optimism. We have real agency in how we run our schools. You'll hear me say that often. People are like victims, they're this, that, and the other. We have real agency if we're leaders and we're strong and we think through what we want to do. Because we've got parents now, many of them are deeply committed and want us to be excellent in every way. And so let's be that. These are my 10 kind of things that I think will help us be excellent, help us thrive. I'd like to go through each one and then tell you some stories along the way. So this is the most important thing, and if you read anything I write, you'll see that I talk about language often. We must embrace the evangelical mission of our church in a full-throated, joyful way. I was listening very carefully as you introduced yourself this morning because I was worried that one of you might be the principal of the school that I took this mission statement from. Because I'm going to use this as an example of what we should not be doing anymore, okay? By the way, if you are the principal of this school, if you were, I'm not sure you would even recognize that that's your mission statement. That's how ineffective I think this mission statement is. To foster Christian values of service and personal responsibility in an environment of respect and compassion for others in the tradition of the church, we strive to instill self-confidence, intellectual curiosity, strong academic performance through instruction based on strengths of students' various learning styles. There is nothing incorrect about that mission statement, except, in my view, it's education speak, it's learning styles, it's academic performance through instruction based on students' learning styles. It's not the language of the gospel. It's not the language of our popes. It's not the language of our saints. And I think we have to be very intentional about using that language as we go forward. So for the last 15 years of my leadership, I've been very honed in on trying to find ways to talk about our mission in a way that's powerful and succinct and nails it. And the best formulation I've heard so far is, not surprisingly, from C.S. Lewis in Mere Christianity. And he wasn't talking about schools, but this is the way I think we should be talking about schools. He says, imagine we're a living house and God comes in to make repairs. At first we understand what he's doing. He's fixing the leaky faucets. He's cleaning out the gutters. We appreciate that because we knew those things needed doing. But presently he starts knocking about the house in a way that hurts abominably, tearing down walls, putting out courtyards, and erecting towers. And we say, what on earth is he up to? And the answer is, we thought we were building a decent little cottage, but he's building a palace. He intends to come live there himself. That's the way we should be talking about our mission. That we are building palaces, cathedrals, sanctuaries where the Lord resides. Yes, of course, we're interested in...
Right, it's amazing, so it's a beautiful speech, and I didn't want it. But the Institute of School Board Development, great tool. There's also, Mark was kind enough to bring the Catholic School Playbook, which is an excellent tool as well, that gives you a lot of these principles. The Board Development Institute, please consider, there's a bunch of flyers. Christopher Martin, I emailed him about a week and a half ago, and he wrote right back to me, put me in touch with Principal Christine, so it was really beautiful. So please use some of those resources if you can. There were a couple questions. We won't be able to hit all the questions tonight, but we did save some in case we ever do panels like this again. There'll be some time to ask afterwards, but we did try to get a couple over to Father McKaylee.
So maybe this one, just one of you can answer in this question. So what is one piece of advice would you give to a peer recognizing that their school is not on a mission and desire to bring it into alignment with our mission that we talked about? One, our mission, but I guess
For our
our
school.
Do you mean, I'm thinking in terms, if I could think of it depending on your role in the school, right? So I began my own personal journey as a classical educator, or like taking my faith seriously and thinking of education in this way when I taught at a Catholic school that I thought was not living up to its mission, and I really didn't know why. I was like, there's something not right about what we're doing, and I can't quite figure it out. I couldn't put my finger on it. And what I mean, what was jarring to me was just the divorce from the quest for God and the quest for Christ from the academic pursuit. That was really the rub that I was like, it was like, okay, we talk about God in theology class, but he doesn't show up in science, or he doesn't even show up in history, right? It was that, or not literature, right? Or that quest for God is not driving our curricular decisions, you know, what materials we're reading in class. And so I had this feeling that something was not right in my school as a teacher, as an educator, in the classroom. And I started looking for answers. Okay, what is the answer to this? And I found it in the church's beautiful tradition of education, right? Which can be called many things. You know, you hear a lot of terminology thrown around. And Faustin's right, language matters. There's a whole debate about, is it Catholic Catholic classical, Catholic liberal arts, Catholic liberal education, whatever you want to call it. I think it's just the Catholic tradition of education, right? That's just what's been handed on to us. That got lost along the way, and I think there's a lot of reasons why it got lost. And then as a teacher, I just started trying to implement some practices in my classroom, right? It's like my classroom's my little domain, and, you know, never in a sneaky way, never trying to, you know, not deceive anybody. Everybody knew what I was kind of doing. But it did get to a point where I realized that I couldn't realize the fullness of this vision elsewhere. And so then I did seek out schools where I felt like, okay, this is in alignment with my values as an educator. And it's so much more joyful when you can find a place where you're allowed to be, you know, authentically living the mission. And it's authentically joyful when everybody's in alignment on that mission and you can fully embrace it. As a curriculum director, if, you know, my role right now, if you are looking at the curriculum at your school, I would again just, you know, it does go back to mission. You know, have a conversation with whoever needs to be talked to about, okay, how do we get our stated mission, you know, into alignment with what we really want it to be, and then let that drive, you know, and then ask that question constantly. How are the materials that we're picking for our curriculum aligning with that mission, and making sure that you're constantly doing that evaluation. So it would be my advice.
How do you make Catholic education stick or pierce through, especially in a post-Catholic or even adverse society, where the whole world is telling our students very different things?
I can take this one maybe. I'll speak to this from my from Sparhawk's perspective, especially, and from my own as well. I think we're called to be in the world and not of it, of course, right? And that means that we have to be authentically committed to serving Christ and serving our students to bring them to Christ. But I also think, you know, in terms of what not to do, I think I can also say is you're not getting sucked into the culture war. That's not what we're here to do. We're not here to, have a narrative of, you know, the wagons are being circled and, you know, it's do or die, it's us or them, and, you know, I like to think of it like we're building a culture, both in the school and with our, with our parent community, with our faculty, but we're not getting sucked into the culture war. So how do you do that? I think, I can speak to an admissions perspective, especially where you're not just interviewing students, you're interviewing families, and you're interviewing families for partnership, right? So you need to see if the parents, who are the primary educators, can partner with the school to deliver the total education of the child. And to some degree, you're also educating families, right? So, because if the school, let's say, through the wonderful curriculum that Karen mentioned, is telling the students something, but home is telling them the opposite, it's going to be difficult for that to split. At least it's going to create problems for the students. So I think certainly in being very intentional and strategic in the admissions process, and as much as you can, communicating honestly what the school's mission is, and interviewing families, especially for the mission, and then there are other elements certainly that go with that as well, with marketing and development, right? So getting to a position where you can be more selective. In Sparhawk's case, our admission rate has gone. Early, it was 80%. The school's 7 years old, so it's 80% now. It's 50%. And I think that's a good thing, that you can be selective with your families, with your students, so that you can create an environment that allows you to live up to your mission.
If I can say something very briefly, I was talking about this with my principal, and we agree on this, that I started teaching 15 years ago, and I would say that the culture was very much against any Catholic, and all the issues that we know, the woke and all that, the culture in that sense. But today, I think there is a total reversal, honestly. Like, the kids are thirsty for authentic Catholic values. Not just, like, hiddenly. Like, they are seeking it out. And it's like, I want just really also to tell everybody, like, the field is wide open. And that's my sense. Like, I started teaching 15 years ago. You felt a lot of resistance, pushback, and like, right now, I actually feel the opposite. Like, of course, there are students that need to learn, and this world goes deep, and they need to change. But I do see a thirst, because it's like as if all these ideas are so old already for the kids. They're like ancient. Like when they were telling me about communism in the 80s, like, oh, like it's gone. Like, and that's what they feel already. And who is going to answer that question? Anyways, no one gives what he does not have. How do you help teachers who do not know Christ, both to know Christ and to teach Christ?
I mentioned a little bit about just like the Bible in here. It's through action. It's through our leadership. I'm trying to think of what else we do. It's in every interaction that we have with them. I love creating relationships with teachers one-on-one, and so I always find ways to share about my personal experiences, about my weekends and how I attended mass with my family, and I'm part of a Bible study, for example, or my parents are part of a Bible study. So always creating this like personal relationship and sharing with them, and trying to inspire them to grow in their faith is I think most effective. We do have at St. Mary's, we do have a young staff or faculty. A lot of the faculty members are maybe just graduated with their grad degree, masters, and so I think they're looking for that like inspiration or that mentorship or that relationship, and so that's one way.
In what ways do you engage families in your school communities, especially when you try to bring change?
Oh, this is I'll take this one. And so recently, there are many ways in which we engage families. There is an expectation that parents have to complete a certain number of volunteer hours, just as we expect students to demonstrate leadership and service. Parents have to do that as well in the school community, and they have to give back to the school community. And it's not linked to any sort of like fundraising efforts. I know some schools do that. And so that's one way. So we have our Parent Volunteer Council, and they are involved in event planning, or they get to know more about what's going on in the school. We have a very strong homeschool partnership. And last year we started, one of our apprentice principals started Family as First Educators. And so where we meet with family member parents and guardians once a month to discuss the importance of faith in the family. It was faith, but we would first start not by speaking about faith, and then at the end of we intentionally, by the end of the coffee session, we were especially having a lot of our fathers speak about faith in their families. And now recently, I think I saw this at St. Benedict's. I think we had our Dads and Donuts meeting at the same day. Same day. And so Dads and Donuts now we had a huge turnout, and now fathers we're putting together a basketball game for fathers to play against each other coming up right before Father's Day. So there's always ways to, and then I guess in terms of like how do we engage families with communication, not only do teachers reach out to parents, but as I said, I have my weekly newsletter. It's very detailed, and it really highlights the day-to-day happenings at the school, from the infant classroom all the way up to middle school as well. We're always engaging, and just any opportunity for parents to come in. We do encourage for teachers to have the parents and the students be involved, whether it's as a mystery reader or as
room parents.
Room parents, yes, room parents. I mean, they're always involved. It's very common to see parents come through to our school and either meet with teachers or students or myself and collaborate.
How can schools work together and not compete, or compete in a way that is helpful? And how can they support?
Important Because I think it's actually Pope Francis who said that when you know who you are, then you can engage in dialogue, right? You can't engage in dialogue if your identity is all over the place. And then when you know who you are, you can engage in authentic partnership. You know, one thing I love about St. Benedict, Christine came to visit not so long ago, you know, and we go to visit other schools and we can learn from each other, but also, you know, test everything, take what's good, say, okay, it's beautiful what Christine's doing there, some of it will work for us, some of it may not, but it works great for Christine. You know, and so we can have that authentic dialogical relationship and partnership with each other that's very fruitful instead of being competitive where we're like, what's Christine doing? What's her moment look like? Make sure we're on top of that when you're meeting her. You know, it ends up being, okay, how is this partnership going to help each of us be more true to our mission?
And I've also been very honest with some of our parents who have been wanting more of a classical education. And I think I just referred a family to your school. And so I love visiting schools. I love meeting with the administrative teams. I think I've visited Jay 3 times so far this year. And I'm always, you know, picking his brain. He always is picking my brain as well. I have strengths that he may have. He has strengths that I don't have. And there's always like follow-up after that meeting with action steps. Okay, Jay, you told me you were going to share this document with me, or or I'll send some documents. So we're always collaborating and inspiring one another.
If I could add one thing to that also, is that, you know, teachers can partner with teachers at other schools. We were working on our Spanish curriculum over the summer, and St. Peter's, the Spanish teacher in their program, I remember was, you know, flourishing. So we collaborated, and guess what? Now we're using the same curriculum. And then, I mean, of course, events like these, we should really be working together to figure out what works best, right? And that, again, you're absolutely right. It's going to look different. It's going to look different for the boys at Sparhawk. It's going to look different for the boys and girls at St. Mary's or St. Benedict. So, but working together in ways that we can, because, and this also goes back to why we're Catholic school, right? We can't be just emulating the public schools or emulating you know, a secular private school. We're not going to be able to be a public school. We charge tuition. We're not going to be able to do that as well as a public school can. You know, in many other ways. So yes, leveraging your strengths, you know, and your opportunities to flourish.
Okay, one last question before we close in. How important is the charism of a school? You know, I was talking to my principal again this week, and you know, the charism is really the place where the tradition of the church becomes something real that you can participate to. So, sorry for my prepositions. What is the charism of your school, and how does that help you to live out your mission?
At St. Benedict.
Yes, St. Benedict is pretty obvious what it is.
Yeah, no, our charism is, it goes back to what I said the purpose of education was. We primarily want our students to come to know and love and serve God through Christ. And then we want them to see themselves as heirs to the Catholic intellectual tradition. Those are the twin pillars upon which our school was built. That is our charism, and I think the importance of it is that when everybody in the community, through intentional hiring, through professional development, through intentional admissions practices, through the cultivation of community relationships, when everybody is on board with that charism and that mission, it's so joyful. I don't know if I can even express how joyful it is to be in a place where there's that alignment. It's not to say that there's not disagreements, that there's not times where you might have a quibble about how best to achieve that mission, but what we can all come to the table with is an acknowledgement that we all are heading in the same direction, we all want the same thing, and we can engage again in effective conversation because we know that we can have that principle of charity when we engage with each other, that we know that this person believes the same thing and has the same values as I do, and so even if we disagree, we know we all want the same goods in the end. And so it's really important to have that shared charism and to be very intentional in all the ways that Christina's mentioned and Hasana's mentioned about cultivating that within your community in ways that are, yes, in the language that you use, but also in these kind of undefinable ways that are just part of your culture and how you do things in your school.
Yeah, for Sparhawk, we teach boys. We teach boys how to be good men in service of Christ and His church, in service of those in their lives. St. Irenaeus wrote, "The glory of God is a man fully alive." I see that as, that's our target. That's what we're shooting for. And we're doing that through teaching boys virtue, exposing them to, yes, the authentic heritage through the Western tradition, and also the dignity of work and cultivating an entrepreneurial spirit.
Thank you. I just want to conclude saying that Pope Leo met with a group of Lasallian brothers and sisters who are very much involved in education. The whole order is about education and teaching. And he left them with this great, beautiful message that I really loved. And he said, "Your altar is the classroom. Your altar is the classroom." And for me, it resonated for me deeply, because for teachers and the educators, we need to understand that we don't only go there to give a message, a truth, but we go there really to contemplate and to participate in the love of Christ that you can see in the souls of these students and of your peers. Today we heard from the gospel Jesus saying, "I'm the truth, I'm the way, and the life." And I think in education you need to live these three dimensions in a very explicit way. Is the truth that we communicate, is the way in which we want to live out this truth, especially in communion and in our friendships, and it's also the life that we receive, that we give. So thank you very much. Thank you for this beautiful.
Yes. And we just wanted to thank you all for spending the time. We have some gifts over here. Christine was supposed to go to dinner. So again, take a look at the panels, the Board Institute, Development Institute of School and Parish Development. Please reach out to each other, ask for help, and I might just ask Christiane, whom has been a lifelong educator of our children. She spends 2+ hours every Saturday morning with my small boys, and I don't know how she does it. So Christiane, if you want to throw this out, she's been a teacher for quite a long time.
Well, I just want to thank you all for coming, and this has been in the works for some real months, ever since my daughter-in-law just happened to go to an open house at St. Benedict's and was overwhelmed by the beauty of the way in which the teachers presented their materials and spoke to the value of an education that really brings the children to God. And I want that for my school. That is something that we always seem to aspire to, but never quite accomplish. And so it's just so helpful tonight to hear the ways in which you go about getting there. And really, I have 3 colleagues here, and I'm just so grateful for you all for coming, and just really desiring that we can also in our school move in that direction very intentionally, as you were saying, and to take some things from you, so that because clearly that's the path you're on, and I think it's the path we really desire to be on as well. So thank you all for coming and participating in this moment. And I really look forward to more of this. I mean, I think the collaboration is what is going to bring this about for all of us. So just thank you so much for what you do and for being with us tonight.
Okay,
In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Almighty God, you lead us to the fullness of reality, to the fullness of your love. You are the Father who always is working, always making of us the masterpiece that you intended us to be. Teach us to be your image for the young souls that are entrusted to us, and for the people, for all the people, the families that are seeking your love and your friendship. And let's say together, our Father, who art in heaven,
hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen.
Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit.
As it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be,